Well, ready to tackle a new week. Here we go.
I love that. Jay, they lost to Nebraska lost to Northern Illinois. You were there 2 years ago, right?
Correct.
So do you know those players? Does you get anything out of that, knowing the coaches at Northern Illinois, knowing those players? When you're watching that film, does your familiarity there help you game plan for Rutgers?
Yeah, I think it can help you because you know the skill sets of the players. Yeah, you know a little bit about them, you know a little bit about their personalities. Not that all those guys are the same ones that were there when I was there. So there's something you can pull from that. And obviously the scheme stuff you take right off the film. So that's the advantage of it from that perspective. But we're our team and they're their team. We're going to play them with a different group of guys. So, you know, you can only take that so far, but it helps to an extent.
How about from a coach? Do you know the coaches there still, or what? I guess what I'm trying to say is, do you guys trade information, that kind of thing?
No, we don't do that. I mean, I respect everybody's preparation and how they have to go about things. I think their decisions are, you know, the ones that they have to make for them. We have to make the ones for us. You know, that just it doesn't for me. It just doesn't do a whole lot to have those conversations. Yeah.
What have you seen out of the Nebraska offense, and is this a favorable matchup for your defense?
Well, you know, we're going to attack it just like we do any other week. You know, the matchup will be. First of all, about getting their quarterback bottled up. You know, he's, I think, a quality passer. You know, they've had some issues with protections and things like that, like any other quarterback when he gets hit. That has a tendency to, you know, to play into, you know, how the performance goes along. So, but if you can't get that guy off his point, if he can sit back there and go through his progression and all that, well, he will tear you apart. I think he's a really good quarterback. So we have to find ways to get to the passer. Obviously, if you can't stop the run, there is no game. So that's where it always starts for us. We have to be able to do a good job in run defense first, and if we can, then hopefully pressure the passer, and it kind of goes in that sequence.
Coach, do you expect Miles Nash to remain working with the defense as the rest of those guys get healthy?
I think so. He's done a good job. We really appreciate you know, the kind of teammate and person he's been through this process to help on both sides of the ball, and you know, frankly, for the situation he's been put in, I think it's difficult to prepare for a player from both sides of the ball, and he's done a great job of that. So, you know, as long as we're in the situation we're in, I think it'll continue as is.
Probably similar to my first question, but I'll ask anyway.
Gonna try another angle?
No, I'm gonna different question, but similar. You mentioned Tanner Lee, their quarterback. He played against Rutgers when he was at Tulane 2 or 3 years ago. Do you pick the brains of your redshirt seniors who were on the team at that time, see what they remember of that at all, or does that help in any way?
Have not done that. Wouldn't say that wouldn't be something we wouldn't want to do, but we're so much on the front end of the game plan at this point that hasn't been a discussion yet. But it's a good thought. I'm glad you brought it up.
Do you worry when you have so many freshmen, you know, playing key spots? Do you worry about how they would handle this first environment in Nebraska, 80,000 fans?
No, not really. You know, those guys. We'll have to learn to adjust in those situations as we go along. You know, it's different when you're playing at home, of course, but there have been environments here where, you know, we've had 40,000+ people in the stadium, and so I think they'll be fine with it. I guess you never know until you get into that situation, but you know, can it be an issue? Yeah, it can for a brand new player, but you know, hopefully they're beyond that after getting their feet wet here for a couple games.
You would have been coaching in the Midwest when Nebraska was the gold standard for college football. I'm curious if there's anything that sticks out in your mind memory-wise about what that program represented, and you know.
Absolutely. I grew up 50 miles from Omaha, so roughly 100 miles from Lincoln. And the main newspaper for our area of the state of Southwest Iowa, where I was from, was the Omaha World-Herald. So every Sunday it was about Go Big Red. I remember all the way back to the Bob Devaney era. I know I'm dating myself a little bit by saying that, but Johnny Rogers, Jerry Taggy, all those former great Huskers that played back in the 70s, and then Coach Osborne and everything he had done all the way through the time he took over when Coach Devaney retired, all the way up until, really the present. I followed it all the way through, and they just have an unbelievable tradition of history, of success, and a history of just, obviously championships, not so much as of late, but in the Big Eight, when it was the Big Eight, they tore it up just year after year. So I watched it firsthand as a kid growing up, and then as a college player at Iowa State. Obviously, we competed against them, and ever since I've been in the coaching profession, I've followed them and just have a lot of admiration and respect for the things that they've accomplished there.
As a follow-up, is that experience what made you want to become a coach? Was following that team? Was that part of what got you in college football, that you in football?
No, not really. I don't think it had a lot to do with it, but it was interesting to see a program of that magnitude and of that success from so close. Oftentimes kids grow up and they're nowhere near geographically, where they grow up close to a program like that that's accomplished the things that Nebraska had done. So it was an interesting perspective being, only 100 miles away for sure.
Jay, I think Rutgers fans read all offseason about a new and improved Kamoko Toure, and then saw the first game where he was all over the field, and then the last two games where you would expect him to maybe dominate a lesser opponent. Hasn't had a sack yet, but he has 2 fumble recoveries. How do you evaluate his last 2 games, and what can you expect from him going into Big Ten play?
Well, look, we had, I don't know who asked the question last week, but I had a similar question. People are going to adjust their protections, based on where they think the issues are with pass rush, and so he's going to draw a lot of attention. Last week was a different issue than 2 weeks ago because what happened in the Morgan State game was they started sprinting out a lot, and that's one way to get away from a guy who is a good pass rusher, is to adjust your protection and in essence run away from that guy. So the issue for us is not so much whether he gets his sacks, because I think if things happen where people make adjustments because of him, there are advantages we gain in that regard. And we were, I think, 14 of 18 in third down stops in that game, and this has been the third game in a row we've had really good production and really good ratio and percentage on third down. So whether he gets his sacks or not, I guess, is secondary to what the team can do from a success standpoint. And as long as we see the trend going the right way, we're good with it.
Any other questions?
Okay, thanks guys, appreciate it.